Okay, I'm going to talk about this TikTok ban, and I think it's a pretty big deal. So there's a lot of speculation as to why TikTok is being banned. So I'm going to address some of the less likely reasons in my mind, and then I'll tell you what I really think. So to start, some people are saying, some government officials are saying that China is going to use TikTok to basically collect our data, and their collection of our data is effectively a national security risk. Now, here's the thing. When we talk about our data, we have to really think about how our data is being used, right? To kind of determine the mechanism by which our data would become a national security risk. So, if we think about what the US government does with our data, they basically mine our data, they kind of infringe on our right to privacy. They mine our data in an attempt to, what they say is an attempt to protect us from national security threats. So what that means is maybe they will keep an eye out for radical Facebook groups in order to identify a terrorist attack before it occurs, in order to perhaps, identify the planning of a terrorist attack, for example. Now, the United States, actually just recently passed a spy bill, another spy bill, to basically spy on Americans, right? Because the Patriot Act recently expired, so they gotta re up on that. So this is what the United States does with our data. They basically convince us that in order to protect us from foreign threats, they have to spy on us. And there's one other thing that people do with our data, and it is what corporations use our data for. And this is a lot different than what governments use it for. What corporations do is they data mine our data in order to basically target us with advertisements. So if you are on Google and maybe you're searching computer parts, Google will basically work with the people who sell computer parts and target an ad at you in order to sell you computer parts, right? And then the computer company gives Google ad revenue, right? So there's really no security threat involved with this manner of data collection and data use, right? But these are really the two primary ways that our data is used. Beyond those, what other mechanism can our data by what mechanism can our data be considered a national security risk just because China has that data? You have to explain that mechanism. If you can't explain that mechanism, you're kind of just talking out of your ass. And that's kind of what these politicians are doing. That's why I don't buy this data collection argument. So, another reason I've seen out there as to why TikTok is being banned is that basically competitors are, they want more market share. So YouTube Shorts, for example, is a competitor with TikTok, right? This is that short form content. And the argument here is that YouTube is, perhaps they're using their leverage and their influence in the U.S. government to basically convince politicians to ban TikTok, and right, and what that does is all of the people on TikTok will probably migrate to YouTube Shorts, and that brings in that much more ad revenue for Google, right? Because again, 80% of Google's revenue comes from ad revenue, so they're quite dependent on ad revenue. But see, I don't really buy this argument either. It might have some role in this banning of TikTok, but I don't think it's the primary reason. And so, to get to the main point of the video, what is the primary reason? Well, a senator named Pete Ricketts, he's a senator in Nebraska. There's a clip in the description. I suggest you watch it, but he came out and basically told us why they're banning TikTok. They're banning TikTok because there are pro Palestinian movements. There's a pro Palestinian movement. There are pro Palestinian narratives that are very popular on TikTok. And because TikTok is not because it's not a United States owned corporation, because it's not based in the United States, the government has less influence over the content on TikTok. So that means what? What does this implicate? What it means is that for some reason the government doesn't want us adopting pro-Palestinian narratives. They want us adopting pro-Israel narratives, right? So why is this? Is it because of the military industrial complex? Is it all just corruption and they want to keep this war machine going, right? Maybe there's some anti-Ukraine war stuff on TikTok too, for example. Maybe the military industrial complex plays a role. There's definitely some corruption there, right? There's definitely some profit motive there. Or maybe it's that Jews just have disproportionate control over the corporations in the United States, right? So if we move if we move TikTok or we sell TikTok to United States corporations or to United States investors, maybe that gives Israel more control over those, right? Now, I don't think it's some Jewish conspiracy theory, right? Again, maybe Jews do have disproportionate control over corporations, but I don't think that's it. What I think it really is I think there is a divide between the people that work in the government, our elected officials, and the young people on TikTok. What I think is happening here is basically there is an older generation, or older generations in general. They are more empathetic to Israel. Okay, they lived in a time much closer to the Holocaust. Perhaps they lived through the Holocaust, and again, because they're closer to that time period, they're more empathetic with the pro-Israel cause, and they're perhaps have a little bias. They're a little more cautious about any nation or any ideology that might challenge the Israel state. And why is this? Well, they have a good reason, right? Hitler killed 6 million Jews. Okay, the Holocaust is a great reason for this cautiousness. Now, at the same time, though, the younger generation, they acknowledge the Holocaust. They're not saying that the Holocaust didn't happen, by and large. Instead, what they're saying is that, to some extent or another, the Israel state has become the new Nazi regime. Now, there's a lot of debate over this genocide word, right? The pro-Israel camp thinks that if they can convince the pro-Palestinian camp that they're not committing genocide, then they're somehow going to win this debate, right? And likewise, and vice versa, the pro-Palestinian camp thinks that if they can convince the pro-Israel camp that this is a genocide in Gaza, that they win somehow. That's not how this works. There's a lot of debate over this genocide word. I don't think it really matters. I would define it as a genocide, but it doesn't really matter what individuals define it as. What matters is that we remain objective about what's happening. Okay, so what I think is happening is that, again, these older generations, they fear basically another uprising of a Nazi regime, an anti-Semitic Nazi regime, and that has blinded them from being objective about what Israel is doing to Palestine in Gaza right now, or to Gaza. It's blinded them to the fact that they've killed 19,000 civilians. Now, that's not to say that we should whitewash we should forget about what happened on October 7th. That's not the point here. There's the pro-Israel side will have you believe that you are pro-Hamas if you are pro-Palestine. That's not true, okay? You can be pro-innocent Gazan, pro-innocent Palestinian, and be anti-Hamas. Likewise, you can be pro-Israeli and anti-IDF and anti-Netanyahu, okay? This is the nuance that the media in the United States, the government officials, and those older generations they're not picking up on that nuance. They believe that if you are pro-Palestine, you are pro-Hamas. That's just not true. Again, it's this nuance and that we're forgetting here. And I think the younger generation is picking up on that nuance better. I think they are basically, again, it's the older generations who are fearing the development of a Nazi Germany-esque movement against Israel. And in that process, they didn't realize that the Israel itself has become the Nazi Germany-esque movement. It's not to say that 19,000 people is equal to 6 million people, okay? It's not to say that 19,000 civilian deaths in Gaza is equal to 6 million Jews in the Holocaust, right? But that's not how we compare it. We don't compare atrocities like this. We don't say that you need to kill 6 million people before it's considered a genocide. That's not how we determine what a genocide is. So we need to fill in this nuance. Again, what I think is happening is that these older generations are so fearful, they're so defensive of Israel because they are closer to that Holocaust than the younger generations are. And I think that's given the younger generations a bit more objectivity on the matter. And that objectivity is showing itself on TikTok. So, what are these older politicians trying to do? They're trying to ban TikTok. What is basically happening here? Elon Musk bought Twitter, and he kind of, to some extent, he removed the censorship on Twitter. What the government is trying to do to TikTok is the reverse of what Elon Musk did to Twitter. They're basically trying to turn TikTok into a censored platform that is controlled by, well, we could say by the military-industrial complex, we could say by corporations, or we could say purely just by a fearful older population that has lost the ability to be objective about what Israel is doing to Gaza right now. Again, we can't forget about those 19,000 innocent civilians. Sure, you killed some Hamas with them. Whatever. Congratulations. What are you actually doing, though? What that tells me, there's 34,000 deaths, so maybe you've killed roughly what? Three innocent civilians for every two Hamas members. That ratio is not good enough, and the reason it's not good enough is because you are creating more conflict. If the ratio was good enough, Iran would not be getting involved. So what you're doing is you're basically creating more conflict in the future. This cycle of war does not stop if you keep creating more terrorists. Every time you kill an innocent civilian, the innocent civilian's brother or sister or dad or whatever becomes a Hamas member. You are creating radicals. What we have to do here is, as a world, the entire world, what we have to do here is we have to understand that it's not the Palestinians who are at fault here. It's not Israelis. It is the radical militant groups. It's going to require the innocent civilians in Israel and in Gaza to take control of Hamas and the IDF and Netanyahu. That's the only way we can fix this. And beyond that, the United States obviously has a big role in this too. United States voters effectively decide whether we fund this or not, whether we fund this war or not. We have to vote these motherfuckers out. And I shouldn't say that, because I shouldn't use those words. I shouldn't insult, because really, again, we have to empathize with these older generations who have lost that capacity to look at the situation objectively. We have to realize that the reason they can't look at it objectively is because their emotions are clouding that objectivity because of the emotional attachment they have to this Holocaust event, right? But we still have to be strict. What that ultimately means is young people have to get out and vote. We have to, and we can look at the polls. There's a lot more young people on the left and right that support Palestine than there are old people that support Palestine, right? there is still a bit of a left-right divide there. Referring to the most recent polls I saw, but it's definitely more of a young movement on the pro-Palestinian side. So beyond that, though, what there's a bigger overarching pattern here. It's censorship. Okay, this ban on TikTok is an attempt to censor. It's effectively an infringement on the First Amendment. The First Amendment is the foundation of a healthy society. If people cannot freely share thoughts and ideas, you're going to create a sick society that can't solve the problems in that society. Okay, and the reason for this is because when you create two radical narratives and you try to completely eliminate one, which is what this TikTok ban is trying to do, you're ignoring the reality of duality. Duality says that there's going to be people on both sides of this conflict no matter what. When you try to ban one completely, you're not getting rid of it. What you're doing is you're actually further radicalizing the people that identify as pro-Palestinian, right? You're creating more Hamas members by trying to ban TikTok. What you should do instead is you should embrace TikTok. And what that will do is that will allow conversations to flourish in this area and create nuance in between the two radical narratives. That nuance, again, back to this reality of duality we live in. That nuance fills in all of the space in between the two ends of the duality, right? The two ends of the spectrum. You can't have light without darkness. You can't have good without bad, right? What this implies is that, no matter, depending on which side you fall on, pro-Palestinian is dark perhaps, or light, doesn't matter, and pro-Israel is the other. All of the nuance in between is all of the colors that you see in nature. We are trying to make everything black and white, but that is not how reality works. There are all these different colors in between. That those different colors are akin to the nuance. We have to fill in that nuance. And censorship hinders that nuance. Censorship creates two polar opposites, two polar radical belief systems, and it will destroy our ability to work together. It creates division, right? It's funny because I think the Founding Fathers did a really good job with the First Amendment. What the First Amendment did is it protected the right to speech, right? The government can't control it. But what the Founding Fathers couldn't do is they couldn't foresee our technology. They couldn't foresee radio and television and internet and social media, right? So what happened when we developed the radio is basically all the narrative that the radio hosts wanted to tell us, they started telling us, right? And there was no ability to communicate back with that radio host. It was all one-way communication. We were being told what to believe and what to think rather than how to think, right? And then came television. Television was similar, except you got some advertisements, right? So now we started profiting from those divisive narratives and from that one-way communication. But then came the internet, and then came social media. And what social media did was it basically returned two-way communication. Now the person who was spewing the narrative can get challenged, right? Now the listener can challenge the person spewing the narrative. This changed the formula of this kind of reset the nature of free speech that existed before technology, right? So what I think happened was 70s, 80s, 90s, when radio and television were taken off, I think those older generations, I think they got brainwashed a little bit. I think they listened too much and didn't challenge enough. And the younger generations with social media have that capability to challenge the narrative they're being heard. They have the two-way communication. And with that, we've kind of had a reset, right? We're resetting that free speech model that the First Amendment intended. So with that reset, the older generation is scared of that reset, right? Because they've been conditioned into these older beliefs. And again, those older beliefs come down to the fact that the older generations are more empathetic to the pro-Israel cause because they were closer to the Holocaust. and it's ruined their ability to be objective on the matter. So we have to understand what this technology, the implications that technology has had on the First Amendment. I think, I think social media is fixing it. I think it's setting everything straight. With the the legacy media is dying. That one-way communication, one-way media, it's dying. It's being replaced by independent media, by content creators that communicate with their listeners, with their viewers. That's a good thing. The legacy media is being challenged because there's finally a return of two-way communication. All right, and this is going to solve a lot of problems in the future that technology that original onset of technology created. We couldn't foresee those issues though, because it was so novel. This technology was so novel to us. We couldn't foresee it. It wasn't a thing we could do. So again, stop fighting your ancestors' wars. Okay, if we fail to solve these conflicts now, then it's our fault if our ancestors or if our great 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 grandchildren are fighting the same wars. Don't let that happen. Okay, if you again, the innocent civilians of Gaza and Israel, both of them, they need to rise up against the IDF, Netanyahu, Hamas. We have to take control of these nations, or of these radical groups. We have to show them the nuance. The best way to do that is perhaps for innocent Israelis and innocent Gazans to come together to show cooperation between each other. There's a quote by Geddy Lee. It's from a Rush song called "Closer to the Heart." It says, "The men who hold high places must be the ones who start to mold a new reality closer to the heart." This insinuates or implies that the people in the high place have the obligation to take the first step because they hold all the cards. The underdog is, in theory, the more fearful, the more fearful, the more endangered side in any divide. So Israel has to take the first step. And beyond that, America has to take the first step. We have to start voting for better people, or we have to start trying to dissolve these radical beliefs. We have to start coming to a consensus. And the one major step in doing so is fighting back against this censorship, fighting back against the removal of narratives that a ruling class doesn't like. And again, I'm not saying that Jews run the world. What I'm saying is that fear runs the world. And people have different biases of what they're fearful of. Some people are more fearful of, again, an anti-Semitic uprising against Israel. That's going to happen if you don't address the genocide that Israel is committing right now. So what we need to do is we need to, again, fill in the nuance. Let all those colors in. Forget the black and white narratives. Work together. Vote. Get rid of the politicians who are perhaps maybe a little too far gone to understand their biases and their lack of objectivity. I watched a Mitch McConnell speech about Tucker Carlson and his role in basically holding off the funding to Ukraine. And it's like, this man is so out of touch with what the younger generation is trying to do in this nation. And it's hurting that younger generation. We have to stand up and we have to be the revolution that we know we need. Doesn't mean a violent revolution. What it means is a thought revolution. That's what World War III is going to be. It's not beneficial to any of these globalized corporations to completely destroy the first world nations that create the weapons that the military-industrial complex runs off of, right? There's just going to be a bunch of little proxy wars, and there's going to be thought wars. That's what World War III is. We are probably in World War III. World War III, again, it's going to be a series of proxy wars and thought wars. We have to win the thought wars. And to the young people who are listening to this, you have more tools available to you to win those thought wars than anyone before you. You have a higher ceiling than anyone before you. You have you have more, a greater bank of intelligence, a greater bank of philosophers and scientists and great thinkers to help you win this battle than any generation has had before. We are the pinnacle of the human species because of that information, because of that cumulative advancement that we have created as a species. Use it, use it wisely, and you will become, you will create a utopia on this planet. That starts by calming all of this division, starts by injecting nuance into conversations. You have to be able to argue your opposition's point better than they can. You have to ask questions that challenge the margins of your opposition's belief. You can't expect to flip them from black to white in one conversation. It's not going to happen. Again, inject that nuance. Speak peacefully. Don't attack people. Don't point fingers. You have to be calm. You have to be humble. And if you do that, this thought war will be the easiest war that's ever been fought and ever been won. And in truth, I don't think there's any stopping it. I think we're going to win because I think we have to win. That's what nature does. We live on. The only question is how efficiently do we live on? So again, Hamas and Israel, we need to remove the leadership of the IDF. We need to remove the leadership of Hamas. We need to make peace between the innocent civilians in these nations. And if you're in the U.S., if you're listening to this, we need to vote differently. We need to create movements that demand peace. We need to basically keep doing what we're doing. We're on the right path. Don't give up. Thanks for watching.